Pittsburgh Steeler fans, welcome once again to Tales from 2 a.m. And this is a tired Tales from 2 a.m. because I got to tell you, no, I was not partying like crazy. Old man bad just realized when he woke up that it was an hour later than it was supposed to be. What does that mean? Yes, this time, spring ahead kicked my butt because I didn't realize it. In fact, my wife didn't tell me, and I had no clue. So you can see where my head is right now. It's in the Steel City. It's in Pittsburgh, even though I'm here in Maryland. And it's all about the Steelers. So, hey, welcome, friends. I know especially if you are on the West Coast, if you are anywhere else, it's really early for you today because I know it's like the weather. We talk about, it's 30 degrees outside, but it feels like 10. You know, even though we had a good week this week, weather-wise, here in Maryland, I got to tell you, this is right now, it's 9 a.m. on the East Coast, but it feels like not only 8, because that's really what it is because of the time change, but it actually feels earlier to me. So I'm a little tired, but that's okay. The Steelers wake me up, and the live chat wakes me up as well. It's great to hear from you. No co-host today, but if anybody from BTSC land out there, any of our contributors at Behind the Steel Curtain wants to jump in, hey, you know what? Door is always open. Love to have you here. So here's the thing. Free agency is starting. The tampering period starts tomorrow. Sure, there's been tampering all along, like Jeff Hartman likes to say. I get that. But the free agency period is starting then on Wednesday, St. Patrick's Day. Wow, I tell you what, that's when it all happens. And this is going to be one of the craziest free agent years I have ever seen. You've ever seen, maybe, as well. I remember 1993 being crazy because it was the first real unrestricted free agency. That's when Reggie White got all his money. That's where the Steelers ponied up some money. Really ended up not being a lot at the time. Well, at the time it was, but in essence, they got a future Hall of Famer, and he is in the Hall of Fame, and we'll be talking about that as one of the greatest free agent signings of all time. But I would be remiss if I did not go ahead and talk about the free agent acquisition over the weekend. It's not a true free agent acquisition because he was cut by the team. They did not have to wait. The Cincinnati Bengals let B.J. Finney go, and B.J. Finney is back with the Steelers. Now, I got so many tweets, I got so many messages about my reaction to B.J. Finney coming back because I have an interest in B.J. Finney coming back, not because of just playing and possibly being the starting center for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I own a pair of B.J. Finney's game-used pants, as you know. So the pants are going to be back in circulation this year. They absolutely do not fit. You know what? I talked to Zach Banner about this when we interviewed him last year, and I said, you know what? Why are lineman pants, why are pants so small? He goes, well, it's not that they're that small. It's you bought a pair of B.J. Finney pants, and I bought them from the Steelers store. In Chantilly, Virginia, when they were traveling for the Football Showcase of America, the Collectors Showcase of America. And so what I said to him, I said, what do you mean? It's so small. He's like, he's got the smallest legs and waist he's ever seen. He said he's huge up top, but look at the size of the pants. And I figured I was buying a 300+ pound lineman's pants that they were going to fit a guy like me who's on the bigger end. But I went and looked at the pants, and they were size 38. So BJ and his size 38s are coming back. I hope when everything opens up again that I can go ahead and buy a bigger pair of pants because I kind of look vulgar in these. My wife took one look at me in these pants and said, no, not allowed to wear those in public. Of course, I wore them in public. I wore them to a game, actually. And I actually wore them when the kick heard around the world happened, when Dave Schofield went for his field goals And Jeff, Dave, and we were out together in a local park, kicking field goals, and here I am wearing the Finney pants as well. So a lot of people in BTSC land, I'm synonymous with BJ Finney just because of his pants. Poor BJ doesn't know that he has this connection with me, but I'd love to have him on the show sometimes just to talk about the pants. And I've got to find a way to get a bigger pair. But we're not talking about pants. We are talking about the perfect piece of a puzzle. And I want to talk about this with free agency coming up. What does the perfect piece of the puzzle mean? The Steelers have a history of getting that perfect piece of the puzzle. Back in 2009, the Washington football team, they were formerly known as the Redskins, and the Redskins made a huge free agent signing. And I was working in the DC area, and I was listening to the radio, did not have BTSC at the time, did not have satellite radio where I could listen to Pittsburgh radio, stuff like that. So what happened? I'm listening, and they got who was the prized free agent at the time, Albert Haynesworth. So Albert Haynesworth went for a lot of money, and Washington fans were actually upset. And it turned out to be a horrendous signing. He didn't last long there. He took his money, didn't last long, went to New England and ended up getting cut there because he couldn't pass the fitness tests, and bad attitude, just wasn't a good sign. And this caller came on, and the caller said, why can't the Redskins sign players like the Patriots or the Pittsburgh Steelers and find that perfect piece of the puzzle? And I've always kept that with me, because when you look back at Pittsburgh Steelers free agent signings over the years, you think of them picking up guys that aren't sexy, aren't flashy. They're not big names that you're sending out on a billboard saying, yeah, hey, we got this guy. You're not going to put BJ Finney's names up in lights, but BJ Finney is probably going to start for your team, and he's probably going to do pretty well for the team, being the fact that he knows the system, he's played in the system, even though the coaching has changed on the offensive side of the ball. You can trust that you'll get decent play out of him, and he's not J.C. Hassenauer. And that's not a rip on J.C. Hassenauer. That's just BJ Finney is more ready. This does not mean that they're going to stop looking for the center of the future. Does not mean that BJ Finney is the next 10-year Steelers center. If he is, that'd be amazing. But what I'm saying is they're not stopping, but this is a piece of the puzzle that fits right now for the Steelers. And they have a history of doing that. If you look back in time at some of the greatest free agent signings for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've all been great pieces of the puzzle, and they worked. Let me tell you this. We're going to go over some of the great ones, some of the great free agent signings. I'm going to exclude some names here. And I know people are going to throw this in on the live chat that I have to bring these up because these are free agents. I'm not talking about undrafted free agents. I'm not including Donnie Shell, who's a Hall of Famer. I'm not including Debo James Harrison, who is definitely going to be in the conversation for Hall of Fame, whether he makes it or not. I'm not discussing that here. But what I'm saying is you've got great Pittsburgh Steelers. But Harrison, we're not counting him because he didn't go through. He didn't go through the free agent period. I'm talking about guys that free agency opens and you're looking for those players, not undrafted guys, not guys that were re-signed. Like Harrison, Harrison he retired, then they came back middle of the season. They brought him back in. I'm talking about guys that you're going through this period. And the 1993 period was the start of unrestricted free agency. We talked about that before. Before that, there was something called Plan B free agency too. It was I can't really tell you the roles of Plan B free agency, but it was before the whole unrestricted thing. The late 80s, 88, 89. I remember they signed a guy in 89 that nobody knew who he was. He was a tight end, played very well for this team. His name was Mike Mularkey. He's on my list. I loved Mike Mularkey. I thought he was a great player. When they brought him in, they didn't have very good play at the tight end position. In fact, they were going years without a good tight end. In fact, they were going through guys like Darrell Nelson starting on the team, Preston Gothard, guys like that, Chris Kolodziejski. Those were the players at tight end that they played fairly well. They started for this team, but they weren't what the Steelers needed. They needed an upgrade. I was watching a game, and it was 1984, and I was just researching this for the retro show, and I just watched it the other day. And they were playing the San Diego Chargers. Yes, they were in San Diego at the time. And what happened? They had a graphic, and this was around the 30th of November. It was the Sunday after Thanksgiving. And they had a graphic that the Steelers had far less catches from their tight ends than the San Diego Chargers. In fact, the San Diego Chargers had about 107 going into that game. The Steelers going into that game had 9. And they celebrated the fact that Darrell Nelson, who I just mentioned before, caught a ball to go down to the 2-yard line, and that was the 10th reception. So they were averaging about 1 a game at that point. It was actually it was inconceivable. So they went out and they got a guy like Mike Mularkey. The next year, they drafted, he was a bridge, but he played well for a number of years, but they drafted Eric Green in the first round. And they actually were in a situation, they traded down. They traded out of the number 16 pick to go to number 20. I know a lot of people were going to be upset that I bring that up because that was the pick. They traded with the Cowboys, and the Cowboys were able to get Emmitt Smith. I will go on a little sidebar here and say Steelers were not picking up Emmitt Smith because in the 1989 draft with the 7th overall pick, they picked Tim Worley. He had a very good rookie season. He flamed out after that, but he had a very good rookie season. So they weren't really going for Emmitt Smith. So they started solidifying their tight ends there. But that free agent pickup of Mike Mularkey was absolutely fantastic. He was not a huge headline for the Steelers, for any paper. Pittsburgh papers weren't going crazy that they picked up Mike Mularkey. Mike Mularkey was a very good signing. Dallas Quinley brings up the fact that Jesse James is a free agent. You know what? I would love for them to pick up Jesse James. And yes, Jesse James caught that ball. But the reason I'm saying I'd love for them to pick up Jesse James, that's kind of a very inexpensive puzzle piece that will work for the Steelers right now. And the reason it will work right now, they have the pass catcher in Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron is not the guy that's going to block as much. Now, I realize that in Matt Canada's scheme, you might not be using blocking tight ends as much. However, I would love to have a guy like Jesse James who is going to primarily block. Remember, when he first came in here, he wasn't known as a blocker. He became known more as a blocker because he honed his craft. He worked very hard at it. He went and made huge money in Detroit. And now he has an opportunity to come back. If you get an opportunity to sign him on the cheap, that's your second tight end. And it's probably worth about 2 touchdowns. Even though most of the balls are going to go the way of Eric Ebron, that would be a good signing. You know, that now people will say, no, I don't want to sign him. Why sign these old players? This is 2021. It is going to be really weird. You're going to see some old players signed. You are going to see those lower tier free agents signed before you see some of those mid-level and high-level. The high-level ones are going to go. Trust me. But the money's going to be weird. That salary cap came in 182.5. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. John DeVry asked, how much money do we have to spend? If you get a chance to check out Dave Schofield on BehindTheStillCurtain.com on the editorial side, he kind of puts that out there. And they have about, right now, depends where you look, but they have about a little under $6.5 million under the cap. But remember, you've got to sign free agents. You have to sign number 52 and number 53 on your roster with that money. You have to go ahead and sign your practice squad, the undrafted free agents. So that is not a lot of money to spend. Will they start restructuring? Dave Schofield put a meme out on Twitter yesterday, a picture of Oprah going, "You get an extension, you get an extension, you get an extension." And so that's the possibility. Mule Skinner says, peanuts to spend unless we cut high salary guys. Unless you got Oprah on everybody and everybody gets an extension. I'm not saying that's what they should do. I'm saying that's a possibility too. You might be seeing the return of the can getting kicked down the road, and that's definitely what can be happening this weekend. That's very conceivable. You have guys like Steven Nelson. You have guys like Stephon Tuitt, guys that can be extended. Hayden, they could do an extension. They just did one with Ben. There could be those phantom years in there. There could be. It just depends. David DeCastro. Now, I'm mentioning these guys, and somebody's going to come out and say, well, they should just get rid of them altogether. No, it's just not as simple as that. It's really tough when you're just trying to go ahead and put a roster out and have players. And not just players that can compete, players that could fit that piece of the puzzle. So that's what I'm talking about there. So the Steelers, it looks like they're under the cap, and they are, but in essence, they probably need to find a whole lot more money than just that $6 just to operate, and that's before you sign these guys. So Aaron Jones would be fantastic. I'd love for them to sign Aaron Jones. That's going to be really hard to do. It's going to be really hard to keep a guy like Juju, a guy like Bud Dupree. It's really going to be tough. And they're not going to. Most likely, you're saying goodbye. I'm wearing a Juju jersey today. I'm wearing a 19 because it's probably the last time I'll be able to go ahead and wear them. That's why Dave Schofield was wearing the 19 hat the other day, and he's wearing it as much as he can until he's gone. Man, I'm going to lose a lot of jerseys. I'm going to lose my Bud Dupree jersey, losing my James Conner jersey, my Big Al Villanueva jersey, my Juju jersey. Yeah, it's going to be tough, but that's okay. I think I'm going to go towards more classic guys. I'm just going to break out my Bradshaw and my Greenwood jerseys, and I think I might just do that. But with that being said, I still have the Finney pants, and the Finney pants are back like we talked about at the beginning. That's really good news. But when we're talking about pieces of the puzzle, I feel like Allen Iverson, we're talking about the puzzle. The puzzle. It's the puzzle. And yeah, the puzzle's important. And the Steelers have had a great history of filling in where they need to fill in and make the team better by not being flashy. Let me give you one guy that really fit. And when they signed this guy, I was like, who in the blue heck is this guy? I have never heard of this guy. He's been with 2 other NFL teams, and we're signing him to a free agent contract. We just won the Super Bowl, and this is going to be our safety? We're going to talk about that guy, and we're going to talk about other pieces of the puzzle when we get back on Tales from 2 a.m., Pants, and the perfect piece of the puzzle. If you are on Facebook or watching us on YouTube, just go ahead, stick around. I'm going to take a big stretch, and then I will be back to talk to you. If you are checking us out on any of our podcast platforms, whether it be Stitcher, whether it be Spotify, it could be iTunes, it could be Google Play, whatever you listen to us on. If you download a favorite podcast and it's on a platform, you type in BTSC radio, it's got to be there. So all you have to do is go on over to number 2, and we will be right back after this. Welcome back to Tales from 2 a.m. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. You can call me Bad. Hashtag BTSC BAD. Man, I got to tell you, I've up to 285 Twitter followers. And that's actually a big part of that was because Michael Beck retweeted one of my rare tweets that I had yesterday. And I got a bunch of followers just off of that. Man, I tell you what. I know Dave Schofield's pushing for 500, or is it 1,000 he's pushing for? I'm pushing for just 300. In fact, let's get me to 300. There you go. Actually, I don't care. I don't follow me on Twitter either. I get it. But anyways, hey, it's so much fun. Remember what I always say. If it's Tales from 2 a.m., then you are on here for a reason, because it's March. And there's not much to talk about, even though the new year is here. You bleed black and gold if you are on a Steelers podcast right now. So that's why I love you. We can't do this show without you. Really appreciate it. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the greatest free agents in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Once again, we're not talking Donnie Shell. We're not talking James Harrison. Those guys were undrafted free agents. Now, the greatest undrafted free agents in Pittsburgh Steelers history. I mean, those guys were absolutely incredible. Love to talk about that. We're also going to talk about some of the moves that the Steelers have made already. And they've made some great moves. And that is great news to make great moves. So let's talk here. Who would you consider the greatest free agent in Pittsburgh Steelers history? Josh Smith thinks he knows. Port Naquenba agrees with him. They're saying James Ferrier. Fellas, I agree with you. I don't think there's a better one than James Ferrier. I was in Vegas in 2002. It was right after my separation, my divorce. And the divorce didn't happen yet. So the starter wife that was still going on. But I was in Vegas. I was with my friends. It was a bachelor party. We were partying, having a great time. And I remember them getting ready to go out, and I saw this flash across an update on ESPN, and I'm like, wait, I can't go yet. The Steelers just lost Earl Holmes to free agency. He's just one of the Browns of all places. And they're like, come on, forget about the Steelers. It's April. Or March. I'm like, no. I mean, let me check this out. I'll meet you down there. Because this was important to me. I was bummed. The Hitman Holmes was one of my favorite players. I'm like, what are they going to do at inside linebacker right now? That's a terrible loss for this team. Guess what? I don't know anything. All right? I don't know much of anything because they had it taken care of. Just right after that, they announced that they've signed former 8th overall pick from 1997 from the New York Jets, James Ferrier. Potsy Ferrier, you know what he did. He was absolutely incredible on that team. I don't know if they win 2 Super Bowls without James Ferrier. I mean, they could. But James Ferrier was so important. And when you talk about the great ones from that team, it's Ferrier. But there's others. The very first unrestricted free agent from the Steelers. I'm going to talk about him in a minute. But I'm going to go back to what I was talking about before the break. And that was, I didn't know who this guy was. Who's this safety? Would anybody go back in time and say, I mean, can you honestly say when you found out that the Steelers picked up this safety formerly of Washington and also with the New York Football Giants, that you knew that Ryan Clark was going to be great for this team? He just seemed like a special team signing, and that's it. He just thought, all right, this is another guy that we're a no-name guy. Guess what? He was a name. The Pittsburgh Steelers knew his name. The front office knew what he can do and how he could fit. So basically, he was a piece of the puzzle. And they took that piece of the puzzle and they put it on the table. And they stuck it down. Now, did it fit right away? No, because they had it sideways a little bit. Then through the next year, they realized that they could shift it a little bit, turn it around, press it down, and it fit like a glove. It was perfect fit. And that's what Ryan Clark was. Mule Skinner says Clark was severely underrated. Thaddeus Kennedy says Ryan Clark's hit on Willis, which was Willis McGahee, was absolutely nasty. Yeah, really was. Those were great. That was a great signing. Just because a signing is not sexy, just because you're not getting that prized free agent that everybody's talking about, doesn't mean that's going to work. Cleveland Browns are going to sign a lot of big names in the next couple of weeks because they've got a bunch of money. But all those superstars on one team don't always absolutely fit. I get it. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers brought some superstars in last year, and it did work for them. I get that. But this isn't like basketball with the dream team. This isn't Bosch and LeBron James joining Dwayne Wade. Those were five guys. Those were three guys in a lineup of five. This is a lot different. You have to make it fit. And that's probably what they need to do. They need to look for the fits. So when they sign a guy like BJ Finney and they look at a guy like Jesse James, I know that's not sexy to anybody, but those could be good fits, especially how fiscally responsible the Steelers need to be right now because they just don't have it under the cap. Now, Mule brought up one of my all-time favorites, and this was the guy, and I mentioned him earlier. Kevin Green was the very first free agent signing for the Steelers in the unrestricted period. It happened almost 28 years ago to the day. Because remember the blizzard of 93? This happened during the blizzard of 93. And I know that we're looking at the anniversary of that right around now. Was it Pompiani that was bringing it up on Twitter? That was one of the craziest blizzards I've ever been in. And I remember just it being a footnote in the sports section. The Steelers went out and signed Kevin Green. And I remember this guy. I was like, yeah, that guy was a very good player for the Rams. I remember him. I was thinking at the time, man, he's been around a while because I know he was a rookie in 85 and this is 93. Oh, that'd be nice. Let's see how he fits. He fit real well. Only played 3 years for the Steelers. But man, he had some of his best years in black and gold. And he was a fantastic player. And we lost him right before Christmas. Lost him in December of this year. Rest in peace to one of the great ones. And we've talked about it. He's going to go down as one of the greatest free agent signings of all time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Is he the best? Is Ferrier the best? Hey, I'd love to hear from you. Who's the best of those two? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter who was the best. Doesn't. They had a great legacy. But who do you consider the greatest free agent signing in Pittsburgh Steelers history? I'd love to know. Dan Kinsella was not a free agent signing, by the way. But he's checking us out on Facebook. He's got a cat. And he says Andre Hastings. Man, I forgot about Andre Hastings. I did not put Andre Hastings on my list. Andre Hastings was amazing in the Super Bowl for the Steelers. Number 88. All those catches, 10 catches in the Super Bowl 30. He came from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Here's an interesting story. The Steelers in 1994, they were on the verge of breaking out, in which they went to the AFC Championship game after the 94 season. Of course, the Super Bowl after the 95 season. They really needed to get somebody. They really needed another wide receiver. Now, this was before the draft, before they picked up Charles Johnson as the number 1 overall pick. But they needed somebody in there. Yancey Thigpen wasn't the guy yet. He was still more of a special teamer that would come in and make some decent catches, but he wasn't the guy. They did not pick up Hastings until right before, I believe, the 95 season. But they were looking at another guy. They were looking at the Super Bowl champions, the Dallas Cowboys at the time. And they had a wide receiver there. Of course, no, I'm not talking about Irvin. I'm talking about another guy that was really good for that team. Do you remember who he was? He was a receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. I believe he wore number 80, if I'm not mistaken. And do you know what his name was? Because the Steelers were about to go ahead and throw some money at this guy. They were really looking at this guy. And the reason they were looking at him is because he showed up really well. He showed up very well in the playoffs, in the World Series. The World Series, gosh, man, I'm losing my mind. I just called it the World Series. In the Super Bowl. Who am I talking about? I'm talking about Alvin Harper. And Alvin Harper was really good for that team. And so he was the guy that was going to be a free agent, but he had a transitional tag. So the Steelers were going to have to give up a 1 and a 3 to get him. And here I am, not knowing anything at the time, saying, yeah, get this guy. He can make your team great. They didn't. Tampa Bay Buccaneers did. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers did not get their money's worth out of this guy. Tampa Bay Buccaneers also had to make room for him. And so there was another guy that they did not re-sign, and it was Andre Hastings. And Hastings comes in as a really good signing for this team. You know, that's what they do. They bring in guys. What would have the 11-0 start been last year without a guy like Tyson Alualu? When they signed Tyson Alualu, did he care? 2017, when he came over from Jacksonville, you're like, yeah, he's a number 1 pick. He was picked before. He's picked after Joe Hayden. He was picked at number 10. I think Hayden was number 7. He was picked 8 picks before Pouncey. Yeah, I mean, it's cool, but did you think it was going to be great? He was a good piece of the puzzle for a couple years. He was a good backup. Last year, everyone's freaking out because Javon Hargrave's gone. Did anybody miss Javon Hargrave last year? No, not really. You know, they would have loved to have kept Javon. Now Tyson Alualu's here. He's a free agent. He's 35. But they might go ahead and throw some not a sweetheart, a hometown deal at him. That would be a great signing for him, because that it's not going to make huge headlines, but it's good. It's real good if they can go ahead and do it. Let's go ahead and look at some other free agents, and there's some guys that I actually don't have on my list here that I really like out here. Mule Skinner says Thigpen was a Saints castaway. I remember him as a 4th-round draft pick out of San Diego. I didn't realize he was with the Saints. Thigpen ended up being great. I loved Thigpen. I was actually at his very first game. Portna says Tommy Gunn was a productive dude. He was the XFL MVP. Nobody cared about signing this guy. He was just a footnote. Same with, they even brought in Charlie Batch after him. These guys weren't supposed to do anything. They were great pieces of the puzzle. And my gosh, he went to the second round of the playoffs with the Steelers. You also had a great backup for the team. Wow. Those are some guys. Thaddeus says D'Angelo Williams. Man, Le'Veon Bell went down a lot. D'Angelo Williams was there to pick up the pieces. Thaddeus says Mike Tomczak was a great signing to replace Neil O'Donnell. Yeah, he was. A lot of people are bringing up the bus. Not a free agent signing. When we talk about the greatest trades in free agent history, in Pittsburgh Steelers history, one of the greatest trades ever. Oh my gosh. We'll talk about that another time. I really don't count Fast Willie Bortna, mentioning Fast Willie Parker, because another undrafted free agent. So that's a guy that I don't really look at. Mule Skinner said Tommy Gunn had a severe injury, and that was it for TG. Yeah, and he was also in Denver at the time when Denver wasn't really, they weren't done with John Elway. In fact, they drafted him out of UCLA in 1992, and John Elway was there still hadn't won Super Bowls yet, ended up winning them at the end of his career. Pretty good signings. Thaddeus says Legarrette Blount was a nice signing. LOL. I'm going to bring this up on the board. And I'm going to take a lot of crap for this. Legarrette Blount was a good signing. I actually think so. I know Thaddeus is being facetious here. I don't think he was a bad signing. Here's the thing. They didn't use Legarrette Blount right. Was Legarrette Blount a jerk? Yeah. They were running the wheels off of Le'Veon Bell. If Legarrette Blount didn't jerk out and leave because he didn't like the way he was being used, guess what? They might go farther in the playoffs that year. Now, the thing about Legarrette Blount, if they would have played him a little bit more, he had an attitude problem. The players were glad when he was gone. But they brought a guy in, they paid him, and they didn't do anything with him. And they tried to do the same thing. They really tried to do the same thing with D'Angelo Williams. But Bell got hurt, and they needed him. Let's talk about some other great free agents. I've got a list here, too. John C. says Jericho Cotchery. Was that a sexy free agent signing? Didn't he have like 10 touchdowns one year? Yeah. Really did. Really did. Jericho Cotchery, he was not on the top of anybody's list. But he was very important to that team. Josh Smith, the greenskeeper. Mewelde Moore, underrated signing. I had Mewelde on my list. Man, Mewelde had a start in 2008. They might not go as far as they did in 2008 without Mewelde Moore. Matt Stofko with a great question I'm going to get to in a little bit. I like that. Steven Nelson. Okay, he hasn't been here long. The highest priced free agent in Pittsburgh Steelers history was Steven Nelson. I got to tell you, it's ended up helping solidify the cornerback situation. Really good signing. One of my favorites, and I put up there in the top 5, is Jeff Hardings. Jeff Hardings is not going down in history with Mike Webster, Dermontti Dawson, and he's not going down in history with the other guy, Marquise Pouncey. He's not. But Jeff Hardings bridged the gap, helped them win a Super Bowl, and was really important to that team. He's a guy you look at right now. When you think about the Steelers finding a perfect piece of the puzzle, that guy was the perfect piece of the puzzle. And when you're looking at, I think he was in his 30s at the time when they brought him in. And when you're looking at a guy like that, Jeff brought up a guy like Alex Mack the other day who's 35 years old. You could bring a guy like that in. You can. Get a couple years out of them. They're not going to now because they brought in BJ Finney. But you could bring in an older player. And the reason I'm going to bring up those older players right now, there's some names being bandied about. There's some players saying they would love to play for the Steelers, like Adrian Peterson. And apparently Adrian Peterson, it was down to the Steelers and Saints in 2017 to who he was going to sign with. Sign with the Saints. He brought up that he wants to play for the Steelers. Would you sign Adrian Peterson? Before you say no, what kind of benefits would you get out of him with a very cheap contract? Probably more benefits than you'd ever know. What about Frank Gore? Would you sign a Frank Gore? Man, he's been around a long time, but he's not going to be your bell cow. Neither would Adrian Peterson. But if you bring in a guy that's good in the locker room and could do some good things on the field in their 30s, yeah, that's pretty good. Remember Otis Anderson? He was a free agent signing for the Giants. Man, he's Super Bowl MVP also. He was that old guy that they could trust with the ball, and he was a Super Bowl MVP because of it. You know, there's some, just because they're not sexy signings doesn't mean that they can't fit. You know, we're looking at, Portna brings up Harding's left, then it was Justin Hardwig. Ugh, yeah, and plus Justin Hardwig called my friend Tony Defio an idiot, so I'm never going to forgive him for that. Here's my favorite, one of my favorites. They came around the same time, and they're all running backs. There's actually 3 of them that all came in the mid-90s. John L. Williams, probably one of my favorite fullbacks in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Wasn't here long. He was great, and he was very important in 94 and 95 for those teams. We talked about Mewelde Moore. Eric Pegram was another one, man. Eric Pegram, they lost Barry Foster. What are we going to do without Barry Foster? You bring in Eric Pegram, and he and Bam Morris put everything together for that team, and they ran the ball well, and they went to the Super Bowl. Ray Seals is a guy that was a great free agent pickup for that team. Dwayne Washington, Wayne Gandy, Duval Love, Brent Alexander, guys like that. Dallas, I'm not going to give you Guy Wimper, and I see your Guy Wimper, and I raise you a Barrett Brooks. I'm not going to put those guys on the board, but I love you bringing that one up. Boo Bash. I got to bring Boo Bash up here. Chemo. All you got to say is chemo. That was not a high-profile signing. You think chemo was a perfect piece of the puzzle? Yeah. Yeah, he was. Thaddeus is disagreeing with me. I have no problem with that. But yeah, you're going to see some older guys. Older free agents are going to be signed. And yeah, I get it. Portna says, I would also like to play for the Steelers. I love that. You know, this is not going to be your average free agent year. It's going to be different. It has to be different. The guy I had on my list, and then I was going to bring up, and then I got sidetracked. Another former Ram that we did lose most recently this year. Tim Lester was a free agent fullback that was signed from the Rams to keep playing with Bettis. Still have the t-shirt of him as the bus driver. Yes. I got to tell you, though, you are correct and you're not correct. I want to go ahead and correct you there a little bit. Tim Lester came before the bus. Tim Lester was on that 95 team. So actually, they went to Tim Lester and said, hey, you blocked for this guy. What are your thoughts on Jerome Bettis? And he's like, yeah, if you get a chance to bring him in, you bring him in. Tim Lester was a big part of Bettis coming here. Bam Morris was not, Dallas asked about Bam Morris. No, he wasn't a free agent for the Steelers, but they coupled Pegram with Bam Morris. And when they lost Barry Foster, Bam Morris was a 3rd-round pick in 1994 out of Texas Tech. So there you go there. There have been bad free agents too. You're not going to hit on every single one of them. Morgan Burnett looked like, man, I was with BTSC when they signed Morgan Burnett. I'm like, this is the guy. They needed this guy. This is the greatest free agent signing in Pittsburgh Steelers history. Yeah, I was wrong. And I'm not afraid to mention that I'm wrong. Sean Mahan, not a good free agent signing for him. Ladarius Green could have been a great free agent signing, but he was hurt. They didn't look into him, so it was a bad signing. And some people might disagree with me on this. Mike Mitchell, hated the signing, and I didn't like the player. He had some moments for the team, but no, didn't love him. Another guy that I forgot, Deuce. Loved the Deuce signing, says Portna. Deuce signing was great. Got hurt, but man, in 2004, he was off. He would have had a 1,000-yard season and even more, but he just got hurt. Thaddeus says Burnett played good for the Browns the next year. Yeah, he did. You also remember when we're talking about the perfect piece of the puzzle, we're talking about fit. Some puzzle pieces don't fit in Pittsburgh. Well, some puzzle pieces aren't going to fit elsewhere. Think about some puzzle pieces that are going to go elsewhere. Juju might not fit as well with the Raiders or a team that's looking at him. He might, it might be great, but he might not fit there. Le'Veon Bell didn't fit in with the Jets. Really didn't. Not all guys are going to fit in other places. That's one of the things that you need to look at is how they're going to fit. So one last question that I brought up, that I said that I was going to bring up earlier. And it was Matt Stofko brought this up. And Matt asked, who was the worst free agent loss for the Steelers? And so, you can look at a couple of them. I thought Chad Brown was a rough loss for the team. However, they had a lot of linebackers. And so losing Chad Brown didn't kill them as much. But if you ask me the worst free agent loss for the Steelers, Dallas's Sing Thigpen, I'm still going with Rod Woodson. Now, Rod Woodson played 10 years here. If he was on that 1997 team, he was in the championship game that year for the San Francisco 49ers, ended up going to other AFC championship games, played in other Super Bowls, played with the Raiders and the Ravens, won a Super Bowl with the Ravens. So that still kills me. But I think if he's still on that 1997 team, that the Steelers are actually in the Super Bowl in 97, despite 3 interceptions from Cordell Stewart at the AFC championship game that I attended. So what I'm saying is, I thought Rod Woodson, that was the free agent loss that was the biggest mistake that I thought they made in free agency, and letting a guy go. And because he was converted to safety, and he would have done really well in Pittsburgh if he would have kept him. But that's ifs and buts and candy and nuts. With that being said, hey, thanks so much for spending the time with me today. We're all out of time here. I love talking Steelers with you. I did not bring up Dion saying Mike Wallace. I didn't bring up Portna saying Neil O'Donnell, so I'll bring those up now. I got to tell you, though, free agency's upon us, and whether you love or hate what the Steelers do, think about what you'd do in their shoes if you were the one balancing the budget, and think about what pieces of the puzzle, no matter how shiny they are or how dull they are. Sometimes you've got that piece that looks like it's just the piece of a tree. It's tree branches, and you're like, this could go anywhere on the puzzle. That's the thing. It could go anywhere on the puzzle. Then you find the spot that it fits, and then you know. At the end, that puzzle's complete, and you're looking down at accomplishing your goals when you look at that 1,000 piece puzzle all put together. This is a 53 piece puzzle. But when you find that right piece and it fits, it's glorious. So thanks so much for hanging out with me. My name is Bryan Anthony Davis. You can call me Bad, and we will be here next week once again to talk about some fun stuff from Steelers past and throw in the future as well. So I got to tell you, one more time, the BJ Finney pants, they're back, baby. That's exciting. But forget about me. Remember these names: Jeff Hartman, Dave Schofield, Tony Defio, Jeffrey Benedict, Michael Beck, KT Smith, Shannon White, on and on, Matty Peveril. Don't forget about Mark Davison. If I forgot anybody, Big Brosco. These guys are going to be busy. They are going to be busy all week long because this is going to be a busy Pittsburgh Steelers week. And you're going to get all the news, not just your one-stop shop. The guys like to call it the one-stop shop. That's true. It's also your non-stop shop. It's behindthesteelcurtain.com on the editorial side. Don't forget about it. It is there, and that's where you need to go first. Whether we're going to have it on Twitter, we're going to break the news fast. I got to tell you, it happens. And these guys are on it before I even find out. And it's awesome. They're just boom, 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 boom. And it's out there. And they throw it out on our Slack channel. And just like that, I got it. And it's out there before anybody else sees it. And it's great. So remember behindthesteelcurtain.com for all of your Pittsburgh Steelers needs. Remember, if you did not move your clock, you got to do it, because I almost screwed up. I would have been on a lot later than I needed to be. And I didn't realize it. Man, I'm losing it when I don't know what time it is. So I forgot all about daylight savings time. So go ahead and spring forward. It's going to get nicer. It's going to feel really good. And next thing you know, we're going to be talking about training camp. Wow. The draft's next. Free agency's first, but it's coming. So for Bryan Anthony Davis, that's me. I ask you to do one thing. Actually, I'm going to ask you to do three things. Be safe. Be true to yourself. And always be behind the steel curtain.